begin with the race for Florida governor. Who will be the Democrat to oppose Ron DeSantis in November? After Nikki Fried officially filed paperwork as a candidate this week, her camp unveiled an internal poll that suggests she and Charlie Crist are much closer than previous polling, endorsements, and fundraising might suggest. Florida's agriculture commissioner and now Democratic candidate for governor right there with us live. Good morning, Nikki Fried.
Nikki, good morning.
Good morning and happy Father's Day to everybody out there.
Oh, well, thank you. Appreciate that. We're going to get to the poll results in just a minute. But first, the primary question. Why do you want to be the governor of Florida?
You know, I want to be the governor of Florida because I want an opportunity to unite us, to bring everybody together, to make sure that there's somebody who's focused on the economic issues that are happening across our state. You know, as I travel our state, whether it's down in Key West or Central Florida or North Florida, everybody's got the same issues. And that's a fact that the economy right now in the state of Florida is failing them. And unfortunately, we've got a governor who's spending most of his time dividing us and pinpointing and putting people against one another. And that's not what a governor is supposed to do. Governor is supposed to inspire, bring people together, give people economic opportunity, not attack other fellow Floridians, which is what he does every single day.
You've been with us several times in the past couple of months, and as this race progresses, and I hope you will be with us more, but this really is the first time since Annette Taddeo switched races, so now you are, there are other people in the race, but essentially this race is between you and Charlie Crist. And your camp released this poll this week that suggests that it's a pretty close race. And I will say what I took away from listening to the conversation was a couple of things. This sort of gives direction to the message we expect to hear from you over the next month before the primary. And that is, for Democrats, the essential question is, who can beat Ron DeSantis? That's what I hear from the Democrats. And number two is, there are almost a third of the people who will be voting are NPAs, no party affiliations. And for them, they are looking for someone, according to this poll, who's not a politician. So is that seems like it's going to be framing your race. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, to a certain extent, you know, that Democrats, without a doubt, number one priority, as I'm calling people across the state, is they want to beat Ron DeSantis. And I'm our best shot. You know, I've been taking on Ron for the last 3.5 years. I've been in those battles with him. I'm a policy wonk, but I'm also a fresh perspective as a Democrat. I'm somebody, again, I talk about this all the time. My mom is a diehard Democrat, teacher for 25 years. My dad is a diehard Republican. And that really is an opportunity to show people that there is a different way of leading. And so Democrats want somebody who is a proven winner, somebody who's going to stand up for their convictions, which I've done my entire life, growing up in Miami, doing soup kitchens and volunteering at Camilla's House and Habitat for Humanity when I was younger. They want somebody who's a true Democrat who is going to be able to be in the trenches, take it to Ron DeSantis and show the people of our state that there is a more common sense way of leading our state, which is still very purple based on all the things that we have seen. And I just won in 2018, flipping a seat by almost 1 million votes.
Yeah, well, maybe mildly purple, but getting increasingly red, according to results we have seen. Here you just used this term, a recycled a politician, clearly referring to Charlie Crist. I mean, Charlie Crist is experienced and he has been around, served in all kinds of positions, but he says he's not done. Why should he be done?
Look, you know, Charlie's a nice guy. But the time of today is that we need somebody who's going to stand up for what we believe in. You know, democracy is on this ballot. Civil rights are on this ballot. Women's right to choose is on this ballot. Gay rights. And unfortunately, Charlie's been on the wrong side of every one of those issues as a Republican, as an independent, as a Democrat. And at the end of the day, we need to be passing the baton to the next generation. And that's me. And that's somebody who has always stood up for what we believe in. And Charlie's got a lot of explaining and unfortunately has refused to do any real debates. I've asked for 5 and he's only agreed to 1, including just one, which is Telemundo. And he says, well, isn't that 2, English and Spanish? He's so disconnected with what is happening on the ground and what the Democrats need and what they want. So no, this is no longer Charlie Crist's time. It's time to pass the baton to the next generation and somebody who's going to be a true fighter for democratic ideals.
Okay, so that said, I want to say, and yet, Charlie Crist has been racking up some serious endorsements. He's got the money advantage. And one endorsement really sticks in my head that I want to talk to you about a little bit. This is a man, to your point, who's been a Republican, who has been independent, and is now a Democrat. As a Republican, he was very pro-school choice. He advocated voucher expansion and charter school. And yet earlier this month, the teachers, both locally, the unions locally and statewide, gave their endorsement to Charlie Crist. So, you know, take that, and then also listening to you talk about your quasi-conservative creds in a way, and it seems like the two of you in a Democratic primary are sort of trying to appeal to Republicans too. Explain.
No, not at all. Not at all. The reality is, I don't know why, the teachers unions, decide to, what their internal decision points were. But I can tell you that I'm still getting plenty of phone calls from teachers from both Miami and Broward and Palm Beach and across the state who are with me, regardless of the union's endorsement, because they know that I've been in the trenches. I represented Broward School Board for almost 8 years, walking those halls, protecting public interest in our public schools as a product of Miami Palmetto Senior High. So I've been in those trenches. And look, what I have been able to do, not just my entire life, again, I was a past public defender, fighting for homeowners during the foreclosure crisis, fighting for our foster care children. And then the last 3.5 years, being our standard bearer as a Democrat, kicking the NRA out of my office, developing a new cannabis industry, the hemp industry, pushing for legalization. So what my platform and what my ideals are is that across the board, the issues that I'm fighting for are the issues that are important to the people of our state. And that's what's important, is that I'm listening to what's happening on the ground. I'm listening to what people are wanting out of their elected officials. And everything that I'm hearing are things that I've been fighting for my whole life. And I'm just taking this fight to a bigger fight, which is the governor's office, and making sure that the people of our state have a governor who is going to listen, who's going to bring people together, and is going to fight for the issues that are important to them, like the economy, like education, like the environment.
Yeah, Nikki Fried, let's talk for a minute about abortion in the state of Florida, and about you and Charlie Crist. Charlie Crist, as a Republican, always says he was pro-life, and yet he favors a woman's right to choose, and he still does. As the governor of Florida, he vetoed a bill that would have required a 24-hour waiting period for a woman to get an abortion. So he's maybe trying to juggle two things and make them equal, but in fact, he says he is strongly pro-choice.
Michael, and I thank you for actually bringing up this issue, because look, we know that if in fact abortion gets banned here in the state of Florida and Roe gets overturned, that there's going to be a lot of women who are going to be struggling, who are going to be forced to have children, are going to or have to go through illegal abortions. That's dangerous. That's really dangerous. And we need somebody who's going to stand up for them always. Charlie has been all over the place, including still calling himself pro-life. And the reality is, talking about that piece of legislation that he vetoed when he was governor, let's also be really fair about why he did that. He did it after he left the Republican Party and was running as an independent and was trying to take votes away from Kendrick Meek. So there is plenty of stories to say, he was doing this for political opportunities, not because he believes in the woman's right to choose. We need right now somebody who's always been on the right side of choice. And I have been saying that for my whole entire life. And these are the times when you need somebody who's going to be able to go in there, say that I'm going to put the full weight of the governor's office behind a constitutional amendment to protect a woman's right to choose. I've been in the trenches, and this is the problem with Charlie. He's been on every side of a conversation. And how can we as Democrats and how can we as Floridians trust that if he was to get there, that he's going to do what he says, because he continues to flip on issues every single day. And this is one that is just way too important to hope that he's going to be on the right side. Look, the American people were lied to by our Supreme Court justices during their confirmation hearings. And now we're going to trust Charlie to protect my rights. I'm sorry, but that's just not how it's going to happen.
So we actually are up against a break, but before we let go of this abortion issue, I just want to delve into just one more question about it. So the new law passed in Florida. Well, while we wait for the Supreme Court to issue an official opinion, the focus, absolutely, to your point, is on the states right now. And in Florida, this new law now leaves choice legal only for the first 15 weeks of pregnancy. And that was passed by right down party lines and as a conservative legislature. What what can you do in that kind of scenario as governor to change that calculus?
Look, I know that there's a lot of moderate Republicans that were in those chambers that behind closed doors came up to me and other members of the Democratic Party that wanted to soften it, at least put exceptions in there for rape and incest and sex trafficking victims. But unfortunately, the will of Ron DeSantis outweighed those. So when you cut the head of the snake off, everybody else, the rest of the body dies, and there are going to be opportunities for us to change it. Here's also a really important fact that we know that there's already at least 1 or 2 lawsuits that have been started against this 15-week abortion ban. And I know that the power of the governor of whether or not, when we win in the lower courts, and whether or not to appeal the case or to let the lower court, sit, is going to be a very big deciding issue of who's governor, who's going to appeal it. And unfortunately, we have a Supreme Court justice right now that the chief judge is somebody that Charlie appointed, who was praised by the conservative right when he made that appointment. And so we cannot let it get to the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court will have a lot of power in order to make a decision of whether or not our right to privacy that's in our Florida Constitution is going to protect that woman's right to choose. And so not only would it be able to maneuver through the legislative process, but also through the judicial process. It's what I did as commissioner, was able to change sides when it came to preemption on gun safety and go with the side of our mayors and our city and county commissioners who sued on preemption of guns. And last week we had the oral arguments for that case. So there's a lot of power that goes into the governor's office if utilized correctly, and certainly being able to work with the Republican legislature and making sure that they understand that this was not what the people wanted, and certainly not in the right direction.
Nikki Fried, hold on. Many things still to talk about with you. We'll be back with Nikki Fried in just a minute. On this Sunday, this Father's Day, we are talking to Florida Secretary of Agriculture and Consumer Services, Nikki Fried, candidate for governor. Nikki, let me ask you about reporting your financial worth. You have to file disclosure papers, and just before you got into the governor's race, you amended your previous report to show that you had unreported earnings of $351,480, a lot of money. In 2018, you amended your financial disclosure. You had said you had earned $84,000. You actually earned $166,000. How do you explain these discrepancies?
Well, thank you again for asking that question. We went through all my financials, and as we recognized that we made a mistake, that I was actually going off the wrong reporting dates and only a shorter snapshot. So we saw them. We made the changes because we, again, wanted to be transparent with everybody. And again, that's what you should expect and ask for your elected officials, that if they find mistakes or they've made a mistake, that they own up to it, they make the changes. And that's what we did. And so we made those changes after recognizing that we had made a mistake. And it was on me that when we first, again, I'm not a career politician. It was the first time that I had filed financials and thought that it was a snapshot of the current year and not the previous year, and then made the same mistake the following year. So we made those changes, making sure that we are transparent and above board on everything.
This back to a couple of issues that we would like to get to. This election is now so much focused on gun safety again, Uvalde and Buffalo and shootings since, and now Congress grappling with trying to make gun law. When Charlie Crist was with us a couple of weeks ago, he unequivocally stated he wants a ban on assault rifles, and he would, via executive order, ban assault rifles in Florida if he has a day one in the governor's mansion. Can you comment on that and perhaps share what you might or might not do?
Well, first of all, I think that's, again, Charlie going full circle. He was known as the NRA's governor and elected official for most of his career, including putting the NRA's head, Marion Hammer, in the Women's Hall of Fame. And he knows that he can't do that on day one. That's not the power of the executive office. What I would do is, what I've been saying, what could my track record as commissioner, kicking the NRA out of my office, closing any of the loopholes that are inside of the concealed weapons program, making sure everybody's got a complete and thorough background check, been standing next to legislators for the last 3.5 years as they've put forth legislation, whether it is background checks on ammunition, getting rid of ghost guns. And there's a lot of work that can be done. And so when they passed in 2018, the Marjorie Stoneman Act, that should have been the bottom and not the top. There's a lot of more work that needs to be done, including obviously mental health, but also making sure that we're getting rid of some of these high capacity magazines, getting rid of the assault weapons that are on the streets, and making sure that we're going after where the money is. I would have to imagine from everything that I have researched that currently today, Florida is still investing in part of our pension fund and some of these gun manufacturers. So there's a lot of things that when you are laser focused on protecting our kids and our families, I've heard so many of these heartbreaking stories of not just survivors and families who have lost loved ones in gun violence, but it's also we have to be also very understanding that it's not just the mass shootings. That every single day, and I've talked to so many of our parents in the Black communities that are losing their children every day in what's happening on the streets. That's why I wear, these two bracelets, which are bullets for life every day, to remind me that this issue is bigger than just mass shootings. This issue has to go down to that we need to change the culture of our country and culture of our state. And we've done that before. Look what happened with the Truth Campaign on tobacco smoking. Tobacco used to be a cool thing to do. Now you ask this younger generation and they think it's disgusting and they would never touch a cigarette. That's what we have to be doing with guns. And unfortunately, we are seeing a Republican Party that is more embraced the NRA and that sacred endorsement and holding up guns in their commercials. And we've got to change that conversation because look, at the end of the day, we can put all the laws on the books that we want to, but if we don't change literally the hearts of America and change the way that we're viewing guns, all the laws in the books could be there, but until we start looking forward to some of these aspects that we need to be changing, we're still going to see gun violence.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up? Your purview as Agriculture Secretary is concealed weapons licenses. The governor, DeSantis, just vetoed 80 plus more positions to do those checks. Where do you stand on constitutional carry that this governor obviously favors?
And that's exactly why he vetoed my 83 positions, because he's in favor of open carry, which is so dangerous. I've talked to police officers on the streets, asking them their opinions, and they said, look, this is going to make it more difficult for us. When we go onto a scene, we don't know who the good guys and the bad guys are. There's intimidation if somebody's walking around with an open carry. And it went me to have a very clear example. This year alone, my department has rejected 7,000 either renewals or new applications because they either failed the background check, failed getting the course requirements, or other types of statutory requirements necessary to have a concealed weapon. Those 7,000 individuals would be able to open carry under a DeSantis administration. That is very dangerous for our state, for our law enforcement officers, for people that are on the streets. So I am completely opposed to open carry. And unfortunately, the governor, in a time like this, he wants to go even more extreme. The people of our state do not want open carry. This is so out of tune. The governor's so out of touch with what is happening on the ground here in our state. And this is not something that I would sign.
Yeah. Nikki, you yourself have a concealed weapons permit. Do you carry a gun with you, and when?
So I do have a gun that I keep in my car, so that when I am driving, that it's in my car. So that's where my gun is kept. But this is for personal safety as somebody, as a woman, that I feel that this is something that I felt very strong with, which is why it is important for everybody in this conversation to know that we're talking about sensible gun regulations. I have been doing that as Commissioner of Agriculture, putting forth, changes inside of the program that are sensible, making sure that we can retain fingerprints, make sure that we are getting notifications from out of state that if somebody's been arrested that has one of ours. And we have suspended 35 licenses of those individuals who have been charged and arrested for the insurrection on January 6th. Still to this day, we can't get the governor to talk about it.
We're about out of time. I know that Glenna or I was going to ask you. I'm going to go ahead and ask you. Florida was the only state in the country that did not pre-order the vaccine for children 5 and younger. If you had been governor, would you have ordered those vaccines?
Of course. The fact that the governor didn't do this and was putting his own politics in front of the interests of our kids and our families, what happened to parental choice? Parental choice when it's good for him. Unfortunately, we're in this situation that he's now created confusion and distrust in information that's coming out. We had a couple conversations with the White House this past week. We had a press conference in South Florida last week. We'll have a couple more this upcoming to be transparent with the people of our state, to show them that there are going to be vaccines available here in the state of Florida, but through federal programs, not state programs, because this governor wants to spew misinformation and non-science related facts because they're not facts. And so, yes, if I was governor at this moment, without a doubt, we would have been pre-ordering them. We would have been putting out information. We would be doing stand-up pop-up locations, especially in some of our minority communities. This is something that should have been gone through. And unfortunately, this governor just plays politics.
You know, there are endless things we can talk about. We are up against time, and I hope you will be back. And for the record, we have received a number of dates where your camp is good for debates, and we have reached out to Charlie Crist and hope to have you both on together very soon. Thanks so much.
Thank
Absolutely.
you, Nikki.
I would welcome that opportunity. Have a great day, everyone.